The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat, and Other Clinical Tales, by Oliver Sacks. Picture yourself leaving a doctor's office. You glance around for your hat, spot it sitting there, and reach out to grab it. You try to lift it onto your head, but it won't budge. Confused, you try again. Then, with dawning horror, you realize what you're holding. Your wife's head. You've mistaken your own wife for a hat. This isn't some surreal dream or the plot of a bizarre film. This actually happened to a man known as Dr. P, a respected musician and teacher whose reality had begun to unravel in the most bewildering way imaginable. His story, along with others just as extraordinary, was documented by a neurologist who revolutionized how we understand the brain. His name was Oliver Sacks. Sacks was more than just a doctor. He was a storyteller, a philosopher, and a guide into the deepest mysteries of the human mind. His book, The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat, isn't merely a collection of medical cases. It's an expedition into what happens when the things we take completely for granted, our ability to recognize a face, to remember our past, to feel our own bodies, suddenly vanish. This book has captivated millions, not because it reads like a dry textbook, but because it wrestles with the most fundamental questions about who we are. What is a memory? What is an identity? What makes you, you? Sacks believed that by studying people whose inner worlds had been turned upside down, we could learn more about ourselves than we ever imagined possible. He called it a romantic science, a way of looking at patients not as broken machines, but as travelers to unimaginable lands whose stories desperately needed to be heard. Today, we're embarking on that journey together. By the time we're done, you'll understand the secret, hidden senses that construct your reality every single moment. You'll discover what happens when the brain produces too much of something, not too little. And most importantly, you'll see that even when memory, identity, and the self seem to be lost, the human spirit has an astonishing capacity to find a new way to live, to love, and to create meaning. This isn't just about the brain, it's about the soul. Let's begin. Oliver Sacks invites us to see the world through a completely different lens. Most of us move through life assuming the world we perceive is the world as it actually is. We see a face and instantly know it's a face. We reach for a cup of coffee, and our hand goes straight to it. We remember what we did yesterday. These things feel automatic, effortless. But Sacks reveals that this seamless reality is a miracle, a delicate symphony conducted by our brain. And sometimes, a single instrument in that orchestra can fall silent. This brings us to the first great theme Sacks explores, the world of losses. Neurology, as Sacks explains, has a favorite word, deficit. It means something is missing, a loss of speech, a loss of memory, a loss of vision. But what does it actually feel like to lose a part of your reality? Let's return to Dr. P, the man who mistook his wife for a hat. He was a brilliant musician, a singer, and a teacher. But strange things had started happening. He would fail to recognize his own students until they spoke. He'd be walking down the street and pat the tops of fire hydrants, thinking they were children. He would talk to the carved knobs on his furniture and be surprised when they didn't answer. At first, everyone, including Dr. P himself, thought these were just quirky jokes. After all, his musical genius was untouched. He felt perfectly fine. An eye doctor confirmed his eyes were healthy, but said the problem was in the visual parts of your brain. That's when he came to see Dr. Sacks. When Sacks met him, Dr. P was charming, intelligent, and articulate. There was no sign of dementia. But Sacks noticed something odd. Dr. P didn't look at his whole face. Instead, his eyes would dart around, fixating on individual features, his nose, his ear, his chin, as if studying separate objects, but never seeing the whole person. He was seeing features, but not the face. The true depth of the problem became clear during the examination. Sacks asked Dr. P to put on his shoe. A minute later, he hadn't done it. He was staring intently, but not at the shoe. Finally, his gaze landed on his own foot. "That is my shoe, yes?" he asked. Sachs was stunned. He pointed. "That is your foot. There is your shoe." "Ah," Dr. P said, "I thought that was my foot." This wasn't blindness. Dr. P could see perfectly well. He could spot a pin on the floor. The problem was one of meaning. He was suffering from a condition called visual agnosia, a profound inability to recognize what he was seeing. His brain could register lines, colors, and shapes, but couldn't assemble them into a coherent, meaningful whole. When Sachs showed him a picture of the Sahara Desert, an unbroken expanse of sand dunes, Dr. P saw something completely different. "I see a river," he said, "and a little guest house with its terrace on the water. I see colored parasols." He was confabulating, inventing details to fill the void of meaning. He saw details, like blips on a radar screen, but couldn't grasp the scene as a whole. This explains the heartbreaking and bizarre moment at the end of the visit. As he was getting ready to leave, Dr. P looked around for his hat. He reached out, grabbed his wife's head, and tried to lift it off to put it on. He had mistaken his wife for a hat. To him, visually, she was just a collection of features, an object, an it, not a thou. Think about what this means. A face, to us, isn't just a set of features, it's a person. We see joy, sadness, love. But for Dr. P, all of that was gone. He lived in a world of abstractions. He could identify a cube or a dodecahedron instantly because they were pure shapes. But when Sachs handed him a red rose, he described it like a botanist examining a specimen. "About 6 inches in length," he commented. "A convoluted red form with a linear green attachment." He couldn't name it. Only when Sachs told him to smell it did he come to life. "Beautiful!" he exclaimed. "An early rose. What a heavenly smell!" Smell could bring him back to reality, but sight left him lost in a world of lifeless forms. Dr. P had lost the concrete, the personal, the emotional part of his visual world. How did he function at all? The answer was music. His wife explained that he did everything by singing to himself. There were eating songs, dressing songs, bathing songs. The music provided the flow, the structure that his visual world lacked. If he was interrupted, he would come to a complete stop, lost. For him, Sachs writes, music had taken the place of image. He no longer had a body image. He had body music. It was a remarkable adaptation, a testament to the brain's ability to find a new way forward even when a fundamental part of it is broken. Dr. P.'s story is a profound lesson in how much of our reality is constructed. We don't just see, we interpret. And when that interpretation fails, the world becomes a bizarre and alien place. Dr. P.'s loss was specific to vision, but what if the loss is even more fundamental? What if you lose not just your ability to recognize the world, but your connection to time itself? This brings us to the story of Jimmy G., who Sachs called the Lost Mariner. When Sachs met Jimmy in 1975, he was a handsome, cheerful 49-year-old man. He was warm and friendly, eager to talk. He spoke vividly about his childhood in Connecticut, his school days, and his time in the Navy. He had joined up in 1943 at the age of 17 and served as a radio operator on submarines. He remembered everything in stunning detail: the names of his ships, his Morse code, his shipmates. His memories of his early life were rich and full. But then, they stopped. As Jimmy spoke about the war ending, Sachs noticed something strange. He switched from the past tense to the present tense. He wasn't just recalling the past. He seemed to be reliving it. A suspicion crept into Sachs' mind. "What year is this, Mr. G?" he asked casually. 45, man. What do you mean? Jimmy replied. We've won the war. FDR's dead. Truman's at the helm. There are great times ahead. And you, Jimmy, Sachs pressed. How old would you be? He hesitated for a moment. Why, I guess I'm 19, Doc. I'll be 20 next birthday. Sachs looked at the gray-haired, 49-year-old man sitting in front of him, who believed with all his heart that he was a 19-year-old at the end of World War II. In a moment of impulse he later regretted, Sachs held up a mirror. Jimmy's reaction was one of pure terror. He turned pale and gripped the chair. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "What's going on? What's happened to me? Is this a nightmare? Am I crazy?" He was frantic, panicked. Sachs quickly calmed him down, distracting him by pointing to a baseball game outside the window. 2 minutes later, Sachs left the room and came back in. Jimmy turned, his face cheerful and open. "Hiya, Doc," he said. "Nice morning. You want to talk to me? Do I take this chair here?" He had no memory of their previous conversation, no memory of the mirror, of the terror, no memory of ever having met Sachs before. Jimmy was living in a moment that was perpetually 1945. He had a profound and devastating form of amnesia caused by years of alcoholism, known as Korsakoff's syndrome. It had destroyed his ability to form new memories. His past was perfectly preserved, but his future was a blank slate that was erased every few seconds. He was intelligent and quick-witted. He could play checkers and solve puzzles, as long as they could be done quickly. But if a task took too long, he would forget what he was doing. He was, as Sachs wrote, a man without a past or future, stuck in a constantly changing, meaningless moment. He was a soul lost in time, a ship without an anchor. Sachs wrestled with how to help him. A diary didn't work. Jimmy would lose it or be astounded to see entries in his own handwriting that he had no memory of making. He was adrift in a sea of forgetting. He couldn't connect. "What does it feel like to be so lost?" Sachs once asked him, "How do you feel?" "I cannot say I feel ill," Jimmy replied, "but I cannot say I feel well. I cannot say I feel anything at all." "Do you enjoy life?" Sachs asked. "I can't say I do." He didn't feel miserable, but he didn't feel alive either. He was living in a sort of gray limbo, a void where nothing could take root. The breakthrough came when the hospital sister suggested Sachs watch Jimmy in chapel. There, Sachs saw something he had never seen in him before: an intensity and steadiness of attention. As Jimmy knelt and took the sacrament, he was completely absorbed. In that moment of spiritual communion, there was no forgetting, no Korsakoffs. He was whole. Sachs realized that while Jimmy's mind could not hold on to isolated facts or events, his spirit could be held by things that had deep meaning and continuity. Music, art, gardening, religious services. These activities allowed him to find himself. In these moments, he was no longer a collection of disconnected impressions, but a complete person, held together by feeling and purpose. Jimmy's story teaches us that we are more than just our memories. The philosopher David Hume once wrote that we are nothing but a bundle or collection of different sensations. Jimmy, in his amnesia, was a living embodiment of that idea, a man reduced to a meaningless flow of moments. But in finding his soul through art and spirit, he showed that there is something deeper, something that endures even when memory is gone. He teaches us that identity is not just about remembering what we've done, but about what we feel, what we love, and what gives us meaning right now. We've seen the loss of visual meaning in Dr. P and the loss of time in Jimmy G, but Sachs introduces us to an even stranger condition, a loss so profound it's almost impossible to imagine. This is the story of Christina, the disembodied lady. Christina was a vibrant 27-year-old woman, a computer programmer, a mother of 2, strong in body and mind. She was in the hospital for a routine gallbladder surgery. The day before the operation, she had a strange and disturbing dream. She dreamt she was swaying wildly, unsteady on her feet, unable to feel the ground beneath her. Her hands were flailing, and she kept dropping things. Later that day, the dream came true. She became unsteady, her hands grew clumsy, and she started dropping things. At first, the doctors dismissed it as preoperative anxiety, a case of hysteria. But by the morning of the surgery, she was far worse. She couldn't stand unless she stared down at her feet. Her hands would wander off on their own, unless she kept her eyes on them. Her body felt limp and unresponsive. In a faint, ghostly voice, she told Sachs what was happening. "I can't feel my body," she said. "I feel weird, disembodied." What could this possibly mean? Sachs and his team soon discovered the cause. Christina was suffering from an acute inflammation of the sensory nerves in her body. This wasn't attacking her muscles, but the nerves that carry information from her muscles and joints to her brain. Specifically, it had destroyed a sense you probably don't even know you have. It's what the great neurologist Sherrington called our secret sixth sense, proprioception. Proprioception is the continuous, unconscious flow of information from your muscles and joints that tells your brain where your body parts are. It's how you can touch your nose with your eyes closed. It's how you can walk without staring at your feet. It's the sense that makes your body feel like it belongs to you, that it's yours. Christina had lost it. Completely. From head to toe. Imagine waking up one day and your body is no longer your own. It's a foreign object, a puppet whose strings have been cut. Christina had to learn to operate her body like a machine, using her eyes to do what her sixth sense had always done automatically. She had to watch every single movement. To sit up, she had to consciously adopt and hold a pose, like a statue. Her voice became stagey and theatrical, because she could no longer feel the natural posture of her vocal cords. Her face became a blank mask, because she had lost the feeling of her own expressions. She was, in her own words, the first pithed human being, like a frog in a biology lab whose spinal cord has been destroyed. She felt her body was blind and deaf to itself. She had lost her physical self, the body ego, that Freud said was the foundation of our identity. And yet, she survived. She learned to walk, to work, to live, all by substituting vision for her lost sense. But the feeling of disembodiment never went away. "If only I could feel," she would cry to Sachs, "but I've forgotten what it's like." Christina's story is a powerful reminder of how much of our sense of self is rooted in our physical being. We think of ourselves as minds, as consciousness, but Sachs shows us that the mind is embodied. Our feeling of being a continuous, unified self is not just an idea. It's a physical sensation, a constant stream of information that anchors us in reality. When that anchor is lost, we become ghosts in our own bodies. These stories of loss are unsettling because they reveal how fragile our reality is. But Sachs didn't stop there. He was just as fascinated by what happens when the brain produces not too little, but too much. This is the world of excesses. Neurology, he points out, has no word for an excess of function. A machine either works or it doesn't. But the brain isn't just a machine. It's a living, dynamic system. And sometimes, that system can go into overdrive, producing an overwhelming abundance of thoughts, movements, and impulses. This is the world of Ray, a man Sachs describes in the tale Witty-Ticky Ray. Ray had Tourette's syndrome, a condition characterized by an excess of nervous energy. Since the age of 4, he had been plagued by an endless stream of tics, jerks, grimaces, noises, and involuntary curses. He would shout obscenities at the most inappropriate times, a symptom that was threatening his marriage. He had been fired from a dozen jobs, not for incompetence, but because of his disruptive tics. But Ray's condition was not just a collection of random twitches. It came with a strange, impish humor and an incredible quickness of thought and invention. He was a weekend jazz drummer, and his Tourette's gave him a wild, improvisational edge. A sudden tic, a compulsive hitting of a drum, would be instantly transformed into a brilliant and unpredictable solo. He was also a phenomenal ping-pong player, his abnormally fast reflexes and sudden, frivolous shots making him almost unbeatable. His life was a constant battle between his I and the it, the relentless storm of impulses that threatened to take him over. He called himself Witty-Ticky Ray, A man so full of ticky witticisms and witty tickicisms that he didn't know if it was a gift or a curse. Sachs decided to try treating him with a drug called Haldol, which can reduce the excess dopamine in the brain thought to cause Tourette's. The initial trial was a disaster. The tiny dose threw off Ray's timing and reflexes. He got bashed in the nose by a revolving door, something he used to navigate like lightning. His tics didn't disappear, they just became slow and drawn out, trapping him in strange, catatonic postures. Ray was discouraged, but he also posed a profound question. Suppose you could take away the tics, he said. What would be left? I consist of tics. There is nothing else. He had built his entire identity around his condition. Who would he be without it? Sachs realized that the problem wasn't just physiological, it was existential. Ray wasn't ready to give up his Tourette's. So for 3 months, they met weekly, not to treat the tics, but to explore what life could be like without them. They talked about his hopes, his fears, and the healthy potentials that had survived for 20 years inside the storm of his illness. After 3 months of this deep exploration, they tried Haldol again, using the same tiny dose as before. This time, the effect was miraculous. The tics vanished, but without the debilitating side effects. Ray was calm, steady, and tic-free for the first time in his life. But it was a complicated victory. During the work week, on Haldol, Ray was a sober, solid, square. He was deliberate and calm, but he had lost his creative spark. He was no longer a brilliant ping-pong player. His jazz drumming became competent but dull, lacking the wild, creative surges he was famous for. He felt that something vital was missing. So Ray made a remarkable decision. He would take Haldol from Monday to Friday to be the sober citizen, but on the weekends he would go off it and let fly. So there became 2 Rays, the calm, deliberate man of the work week, and the frivolous, frenetic, inspired, witty, ticky Ray of the weekend. You normals, he told Sachs, have all feelings, all styles, available all the time. We Touretters don't. We are forced into levity by our Tourette's and forced into gravity when we take Haldol. You are free. We must make the best of an artificial balance. Ray's story is a powerful parable about the double-edged nature of illness and health. What we call a disorder can sometimes be a source of incredible creativity and energy. The cure can feel like a loss. It raises the question, what is true health? Is it the absence of symptoms, or is it the ability to live a full, creative, and meaningful life, even if that life is unconventional? Ray found his own unique balance. But the world of excesses can take even stranger forms. Consider the case of Natasha K., a 90-year-old woman who came to Sachs with a condition she had named herself, Cupid's disease. Shortly after her 88th birthday, Natasha noticed a change. Delightful, she told Sachs. I felt more energetic, more alive. I felt young once again. I took an interest in young men. I started to feel frisky. At first, she enjoyed this new lease on life, but her friends grew concerned. She had always been shy and temperate. Now she was a flirt who told jokes and giggled. Natasha herself began to question it. You're 89, she told herself. What could justify such a sudden euphoria? It felt too good. You're sick, my dear, she concluded. You're feeling too well. You have to be ill. She had a suspicion about the cause. 70 years earlier, in a brothel in Salonika, she had contracted syphilis. It had been treated, but in the days before penicillin. Could it, she wondered, have finally caught up with her? She was right. The spirochetes of neurosyphilis were stimulating her cerebral cortex, creating a state of mild, pleasant disinhibition. This was the Cupid's disease that had reawakened her youthful energy. But this created a dilemma. I don't know that I want it treated, she told Sachs. I know it's an illness, but it's made me feel well. It's been fun, but I know when a good thing goes too far. She didn't want the disease to progress to dementia, but she also didn't want to be cured, back into the quietude of old age. I wasn't fully alive until the Wrigleys got me, she said. Do you think you could keep it just as it is? In a merciful twist, medical science could offer her exactly that. A course of penicillin would kill the spirochetes, stopping the disease from progressing, but it couldn't reverse the mild disinhibition that had already occurred. So Natasha got to have it both ways. A safe, stable touch of Cupid's disease that reanimated her spirit without threatening her mind. These stories of excess show us that the line between illness and wellness, between pathology and creativity, is not always clear. A no-co illness can sometimes feel like a gift, a huri, cure, like a loss. It forces us to move beyond a simple, mechanical view of the brain and to see it as a dynamic force, capable of creating worlds of both profound suffering and unexpected joy. This dynamic, creative force is at the heart of our very identity. Sachs argues that each of us has a life story, an inner narrative that makes us who we are. To be ourselves, we must possess our story. But what happens when the ability to create that story is both hyperactive and broken? This is the tragic and frenzied world of Mr. Thompson, a man whose story Sachs titles A Matter of Identity. Like Jimmy G, Mr. Thompson had Korsakov's syndrome and couldn't remember anything for more than a few seconds. But unlike Jimmy, who was lost in a quiet past, Mr. Thompson was in a constant frenzied state of invention. He was always creating a world and a self to replace the one that was continually vanishing. When he met Sachs, whom he'd never seen before, he would run through a dozen identities in a matter of minutes. "Half a pound of Virginia, a nice piece of Nova," he'd say, mistaking Sachs for a customer in his old delicatessen. A moment later, recognizing his mistake, he'd switch. "As if it isn't my old friend Tom Pitkins. Me and Tom was always going to the races." Seeing Sachs, white coat, he'd change again. "You're Jaime, the kosher butcher next door." Spotting the stethoscope. "You mechanics are all starting to fancy yourselves to be doctors." He was a whirlwind of fluent, fleeting identities. He was a man bridging the abyss of amnesia with ceaseless, quick-fire inventions. He was improvising a world around him, an Arabian Nights phantasmagoria of ever-changing people and situations. To him, it wasn't a fantasy. It felt entirely real. But underneath the ebullient, comic surface, there was something terrifying. He was a man in a race, trying to catch something that always eluded him. The world was constantly disappearing, and he was desperately throwing bridges of meaning over the chaos that yawned beneath him. What Sachs found most disquieting was a profound loss of feeling. Mr. Thompson had lost the emotional judgment that distinguishes the real from the unreal, the important from the trivial. One day, as he was jabbering away, he said in his usual even, indifferent tone, "And there goes my younger brother, Bob, past the window." A moment later, his brother Bob actually peeked around the door. A real person had emerged from the phantom world. But Mr. Thompson showed no recognition, no real emotion. He treated his real brother with the same indifference as his imaginary characters, instantly losing him again in the whirl of delirium. Unlike Jimmy G, who felt a yearning sadness for his lost life, Mr. Thompson seemed to have lost the very capacity to feel that loss. He was, Sachs wondered, desouled. His brilliant gift for confabulation was also his damnation, a glittering surface that prevented any real meaning or connection from ever reaching him. There was one exception. When Mr. Thompson was left alone, he would sometimes wander out into the quiet garden of the home. There, away from the pressure of human interaction, the frenzied chatter would subside. The non-human order of the plants, making no demands on him, allowed his identity delirium to relax. In the quiet communion with nature, he could find a rare moment of peace, a restored sense of being real. The stories of losses and excesses show us the two extremes of neurological disorder, the silence and the noise. But Sachs then takes us into a third realm, one that is even more mysterious. He calls it transports. These are experiences where a person is suddenly transported to another time or place, swept away by a vivid memory, a vision, or a dream. These are not just random neurological events. They are intensely personal, filled with meaning and emotion. They are as Sachs puts it, portals to the beyond. The first story here is called Reminiscence. It begins with Mrs. O.C., an 88-year-old woman in an old people's home. One night, she had a vivid dream of her childhood in Ireland, filled with the songs they used to sing. When she woke up, the music was still playing, loud and clear. She thought a radio must have been left on, but all the radios were off. Then she wondered if her dental fillings were acting like a crystal radio, a strange but known phenomenon. But then she thought, what kind of radio station would play only the Irish songs that she knew, in the middle of the night, with no commentary? Is the radio in my head? She asked herself, thoroughly rattled. The psychiatrist she saw confirmed she wasn't mad. The mad hear voices, not music. He sent her to Dr. Sachs. An EEG confirmed Sachs' suspicion. Mrs. O.C. was having temporal lobe seizures. A brain scan later revealed the cause: a small stroke in her right temporal lobe, one of the musical lobes of the brain. The stroke had caused a sudden, convulsive activation of her musical memory traces. As the stroke resolved, the music faded, and by April, it was gone completely. Sachs asked her if she missed the songs. "It's funny you should ask that," she said. "Mostly it is a great relief. But, yes, I do miss the old songs a little. It was like being given back a forgotten bit of my childhood again." Here is the mystery. Mrs. O.C. had been orphaned before the age of 5 and sent to America. She had no conscious memory of her mother, of Ireland, or of the first 5 years of her life. This had always been a source of deep sadness for her. The seizures, this strange neurological event, had become a portal. They had unlocked a door to her lost past. The experience was profoundly healing. Through these involuntary reminiscences, she didn't just hear songs. She felt her mother's arms. She saw her face. She heard her voice singing. She was transported back to a time of love and security that her conscious mind had completely forgotten. The seizures gave her back the childhood she had lost. "I'm glad it happened," she told Sachs after it was over. "It was the healthiest, happiest experience of my life. There's no longer a great chunk of childhood missing. There's a sort of completeness I never had before." Her illness had become her cure. It was a Jacksonian reminiscence that served as a Freudian anamnesis, a healing recollection of the past. Not all transports are so gentle. Sachs also tells the story of Donald, a young man who killed his girlfriend while under the influence of the drug PCP. He had a total organic amnesia for the event. Not even hypnosis could bring back the memory. He was committed to a psychiatric hospital, where he found a strange peace in gardening, away from the dangers of human passion. 5 years later, he suffered a severe head injury in a cycling accident. As he emerged from a coma, he was plunged into a nightmare. The memory of the murder, previously lost, came flooding back in vivid, almost hallucinatory detail. It was an uncontrollable reminiscence that tormented him, driving him to attempt suicide. What had happened? Had the frontal lobe damage from his accident destroyed his brain's ability to repress the memory? Or was it a form of temporal lobe epilepsy, a constant, horrifying reenactment of the deed? The cause remains a mystery, but over years of therapy and new medications, Donald was able to find a balance. He did not forget the murder again, but it no longer obsessed him. And in the end, his salvation, like Mr. Thompson's, was found in the quiet world of the garden. "I feel at peace gardening," he told Sachs. "Plants don't have egos. They can't hurt your feelings." These stories of transport show us that our past is not dead. It is recorded in our brains in extraordinary detail, and under certain conditions, it can come rushing back with the force of reality itself. This can be a source of profound healing or unbearable torment. It is another window into the mysterious relationship between the brain, memory, and the self. This leads us to the final part of Sachs's journey, which he calls the world of the simple. Here Sachs explores the minds of those who are considered mentally defective or retarded. He challenges the conventional view, championed by neurologists like Kurt Goldstein, that the mind's glory lies in the abstract and categorical, and that a life lived in the concrete is somehow subhuman. Sachs argues the very opposite. The concrete, he says, is what makes reality real, alive, personal, and meaningful. In the world of the simple, we encounter minds that are not seduced by abstraction, but experience reality directly, with an elemental intensity. Consider Rebecca. When Sachs first met her, she was 19, but just like a child in some ways. She couldn't find her way around the block, couldn't use a key, had left-right confusion, and was clumsy in all her movements. She was, by all standard measures, a moron. But Rebecca had another side. She loved stories and poetry. Though she couldn't understand simple instructions, she had no trouble following the metaphors and symbols in deep poems. The language of feeling, of image, of the concrete, formed a world she could enter and understand. She was, in her own stumbling way, a natural poet. Sachs' first impression of her in a clinical setting was of a broken creature, a collection of deficits. But then, he saw her sitting on a bench on a lovely spring day, gazing at the foliage with pure delight. Her clumsiness was gone. She was composed, serene. As he approached, she gestured to the world around her and began to utter sudden poetic ejaculations. Spring, birth, growing, stirring. She was, Sachs thought, an idiot Ecclesiastes, expressing a profound vision of the seasons and the cycles of life. He realized that our tests are ridiculously inadequate. They show us deficits, but they don't show us powers. They test for schematic, problem-solving intelligence, but they miss the other kind of intelligence, the narrative mode. Rebecca couldn't function in a world of abstract tasks, but she was complete and whole as a narrative being. She composed her world not through logic, but through story, through drama, through art. When her grandmother died, she was devastated, but her grief was complete and dignified. "It's winter inside," she said, "cold as death. But I know the spring will come again." She eventually found her place in a special theater group. On stage, her deficits disappeared. She became a complete person, poised and fluent in each role she played. When you see her on stage, Sachs writes, you would never even guess she was mentally defective. Rebecca teaches us that there are different ways of being intelligent, and that a life rich in feeling, symbol, and story is as complete and human as any other. But the world of the simple can be even more mysterious. This brings us to the story of the twins, John and Michael. When Sachs met them in 1966, they were 26-year-old identical twins who had been institutionalized since the age of 7, diagnosed as autistic and severely retarded. They were famous for one peculiar skill. You could give them any date in the last or next 40,000 years, and they would instantly tell you the day of the week. Yet, they could not perform simple addition or subtraction. They were calculators who couldn't calculate. So how did they do it? Sachs believed they weren't calculating at all. They were seeing. When asked a date, their eyes would move as if they were scrutinizing a vast inner landscape, a mental calendar. The first clue to their secret world came by accident. A box of matches fell on the floor, spilling its contents. 111, they both cried simultaneously. Then, John murmured, 37. Michael repeated it, and John said it a third time. Sachs counted the matches. There were exactly 111. "How did you count them so quickly?" he asked. "We didn't count," they said. "We saw the 111. This was astonishing enough, a sort of absolute pitch for numbers. But what about the 37? They had factored 111 into 3 times 37, without knowing what factoring was. They explained, as best they could, that they didn't work it out. They just saw the number come apart into 3 equal parts. Sachs began to wonder if they could see the properties of numbers not as abstract concepts, but as sensuous qualities, like tones or colors. Could they perceive a whole world of numerical relationships in a direct, intuitive way? The answer came when he stumbled upon them one day sitting in a corner smiling secretly. They were locked in a strange, numerical converse. John would say a six-figure number. Michael would nod and smile, savoring it. Then Michael would say another six-figure number, and John would appreciate it in turn. They were like two connoisseurs sharing a rare vintage. Sachs wrote down the numbers. Later, at home, he checked them against a book of prime numbers. Every single number the twins had exchanged was a prime. They were not calculating primes. They were seeing them, communing with them. They were wandering in a landscape of numbers, a world invisible to the rest of us. The next day, Sachs joined their game, venturing an 8-figure prime from his book. The twins fell silent, concentrating intensely. Then, they both broke into smiles. They had recognized his number as a prime, and were overjoyed that he could join their secret world. Soon, they were exchanging 20-figure primes, numbers so large Sachs had no way of checking them. For the twins, numbers were not tools for calculation. They were holy, awesome, and friendly. They were serene contemplators of a numerical universe, a world of pure pattern and harmony. This communion was the center of their isolated, autistic lives. It was their joy, their meaning, their connection. Tragically, some years later, it was decided that the twins should be separated, to force them to face the world in a socially acceptable way. They were moved to halfway houses and given menial jobs. Deprived of their communion, they seemed to lose their special numerical power, and with it, the chief joy and sense of their lives. It is a heartbreaking end to a story of profound and mysterious connection, a reminder that what we deem functional is not always what makes a life meaningful. The stories in The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat are more than just fascinating medical mysteries. They are explorations of the very essence of what it means to be human. Sachs shows us that the self is not a simple fixed thing. It is a story we are constantly telling, a symphony our brain is constantly playing. And even when parts of that story are lost, or parts of that symphony become chaotic, the human spirit has an incredible power to find a new melody, a new narrative, a new way to be. As we come to the end of our journey through this incredible book, what are we left with? It's not just a collection of strange and wonderful stories. It's a new way of seeing. Oliver Sacks did something radical. He restored the human subject to the center of medicine. He reminds us that behind every case is a person, a life, a story. The most powerful lesson, for me, is the idea of what Sacks, borrowing from his mentor A.R. Luria, called romantic science. This isn't science that is less rigorous. It's science that is more complete. It's a science that understands that you can't describe a human life in terms of deficits and functions alone. You also need the language of art, of story, of spirit. Think of Dr. P. He lost his ability to see the world, but he found a way to navigate it through music. Jimmy G. lost his memory, but he found his soul in the chapel. Rebecca was a moron in a testing room, but a poet in a garden. The twins were idiots to the world, but they were explorers of a vast and beautiful numerical universe. In every case, when one part of the self was lost or broken, another part, often a deeper, more creative part, emerged. This book challenges our very definition of normal. Ray, the man with Tourette's, put it perfectly when he said that normals have access to all styles of being, while he was forced into an artificial balance. But his struggle gave him a depth, a resilience, a great health, as Nietzsche would say, that most of us never have to develop. These stories teach us that there is no single way to be human. The mind is vast and mysterious, and it can find meaning and create a life in the most unexpected of circumstances. So what can we take away from this? How can we apply these lessons in our own lives? First, practice a little romantic science yourself. The next time you encounter someone who seems strange or different, resist the urge to label or dismiss them. Look for their story. What is their world like? What are their hidden strengths, their unique ways of being? Sachs teaches us the profound power of empathetic observation, of truly trying to see the world from another's point of view. Second, appreciate the miracle of your own mind. The next time you recognize a loved one's face, or recall a childhood memory, or simply walk across a room without thinking, take a moment to appreciate the incredible, invisible symphony of processes that make it possible. We live our lives on the surface of our own minds, unaware of the vast depths beneath. This book is a rare glimpse into those depths. Finally, embrace the narrative nature of your own life. You are not just a collection of traits or skills. You are a story, and you are the author of that story. Even when faced with challenges and losses, like the patients in this book, you have the power to create meaning, to find a new path, to compose a new melody. The human spirit, Sachs shows us, is the ultimate artist of survival. That was a summary of The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat by Oliver Sacks. We've explored some of the most powerful stories today, but I have to be honest with you. A summary can only ever be a map. The real treasure is found in the journey itself. The magic of this book is in Sacks's own voice, his deep empathy, his boundless curiosity, his beautiful prose. This summary is designed to give you a taste of its brilliance, to help you decide if this is a journey you want to take. If any of these stories have sparked your curiosity or touched your heart, I urge you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just learning about the brain. It's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see the world and the people in it. The link to the book is in the description. Also, if you found this summary valuable, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It lets me know that these deep dives are helpful, and it ensures you won't miss our next journey into another life-changing book. Let's keep exploring and growing together.